But will be a relatively cool day with that cloud around, temperatures between 16 and 22 degrees Celsius. This rain is also going to start spreading its way in as we do head throughout the night, so more patchy outbreaks pushing into northwest England and parts of Wales as well. Generally the far south of England and the northern areas of Scotland holding on to some of the clearer spells overnight. That will just allow those temperatures to drop off a touch, particularly in those sheltered glens of Scotland. But into the weekend, it is watching this low-pressure centre as it pushes its way in from the Atlantic, turning much more widely unsettled. Outbreaks of rain quickly spreading eastwards as we head throughout the day. A dry start across the very far south-east of England, but the rain will arrive here later on as well, even if it is relatively patchy. The winds strengthening across the southern coast of England, potential for gales in places. Far north of Scotland seeing the better conditions throughout the day with some sunshine as well. Again, relatively cool in places, but the humidity will also be rising, and it does stay unsettled throughout the second half of the weekend and into the start of the new working week as well. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
And action.
Sergeant read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
A very good morning to you. It's 9:30 on Friday the 21st of July and this is Britain's Newsroom here on GB News with me, Tom Harwood, and Emily Carver.
In just a few moments, following the Liberal Democrat win in Somerton and Frome last night, we will be joined by Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Daisy Cooper.
And as Rishi Sunak narrowly avoided a total wipeout last night, we ask, is there now a narrow path to general election victory for the Tories?
And as Labour achieves their biggest by-election swing since the days of Tony Blair, is Starmer a PM in waiting?
And as I awkwardly promised, I will be eating my hat live on air later in the show, so stick around for that.
And as always, please do let us know what you think about all the topics we'll be discussing, those by-election results as well. Please do email us, gbviews@gbnews.com, or tweet us.
The question that we want to ask you is about this new 25-year-old MP. Emily does not like the idea of a 25-year-old MP.
It's far too young.
I think it should be about the content of your character, not the age on your birth certificate. I don't know. There's a better way to say that. But gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email address to write in about that. But we'll be getting to all of those big issues of the day after your news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Tom, thank you very much and good morning. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Rishi Sunak has suffered a double by-election loss with Labour and the Lib Dems, both overturning majorities of about 20,000. Labour won Selby and Ainsty, and the Lib Dems took Somerton and Frome, while the Prime Minister says the Conservatives' by-election victory in Uxbridge and South Ruislip, Boris Johnson's old seat, shows the next general election is not a done deal. The UK's retail sector did better than expected last month. Figures from the ONS found department stores and furniture sellers had a good month. Sales in supermarkets were also a driving force behind the bounce back. It said these were partially offset by falls in fuel, garden centres and clothes shops. And the average asking rent for properties both inside and outside of London have hit a new record high. Data from Rightmove says the average rent per month outside of London is just over £1,200, whilst rent in the capital reaching a record of just over £2,500 per month. It also found the average property available to rent is finding a tenant in 17 days. That's the quickest time it's recorded since November last year. Holidaymakers have been warned not to touch dead birds on Welsh beaches as concerns rise over a bird flu outbreak. In recent weeks, reports of bird carcasses washing up on shores in West and North Wales have increased as wild bird colonies around the UK continue to be affected. The Welsh Climate Change Minister, Julie James, described the situation as heart-wrenching. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now it's back to Emily and Tom.
Well, a very good morning to you. It's 9:34 here on GB News on Britain's Newsroom with me, Tom Harwood, and Emily Carver.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. So, you've been getting in touch already about that big question of the day. Is 25 years old far too young to become an MP? I think so. Tom Harwood thinks it's fantastic, apparently.
Well, I don't think that we should have a uniform parliament. I think we should have lots of different diverse voices and ages, and ultimately, I think one of the big things that we're missing in this conversation is about competence rather than about age or indeed skin colour or sexuality or any other sort of immutable characteristic of an individual. We should be thinking about how they're presenting themselves, what they're saying, more than what they are.
Well, that sounds very nice, Tom, but it's worth reminding ourselves that this 25-year-old in Selby, the Labour MP who's been elected, worked in public relations, followed by serving as a parliamentary researcher. Not that diversity of experience you're talking about, perhaps?
No, perhaps not, but there are 25-year-olds in and around the country, and perhaps they do need some representation in Parliament. After all, Winston Churchill became an MP at the age of 25. He hadn't had much life. He'd been in the army, but he hadn't had that much life experience. Charlie Kennedy, at the age of 23, became a member of Parliament. Lord Salisbury, great Prime Minister, at the age of 23.
I think young people stay younger, though, these days.
I think that is a fair point. That is a fair point. We do... sort of the average age of having children is getting later and later and later.
Exactly. It's something like... Is it beyond 30 now?
I think that might be actually something to do with the way in which housing has become less and less accessible for young people. But it is a really fascinating conversation. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address to get in touch. And we'll be talking about this throughout the programme. But in other news, of course, it wasn't just the Labour Party that won a seat, so did the Tories, and indeed the Liberal Democrats have won the Somerton and Frome by-election, overturning an enormous Conservative majority of more than 19,000.
Yes, Sarah Dyke has been elected as the new MP for the Somerset constituency, winning by 11,008 votes in a 29% swing away from Rishi Sunak's Conservative Party.
I love how specific we were there. 11,008. Well, joining us live from Westminster is the Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Daisy Cooper. And Daisy, this is yet again a Conservative seat that the Lib Dems have managed to take mid-term. Although we have seen in recent history this sort of thing happen in the middle of a parliament, and then when it comes to a general election, these seats can slip away from you. I'm thinking, of course, of Brecon and Radnorshire, where exactly the same scale of majority was overturned in the middle of the parliament, and then in the general election it went back to the Conservatives. Is this different?
Well, time will tell, won't it? But, I mean, if you look at someone like Sarah Olney, who's a Liberal Democrat MP in southwest London, then she won her seat in a by-election. She's still an MP today with an increased majority, so it can be done. But we never take votes for granted as Liberal Democrats, and I think, as you say, it's a fantastic win in Somerton and Frome. We're absolutely delighted for Sarah Dyke, the new MP, and it's a sure sign that the Lib Dems are back in the West Country.
Daisy, fantastic result for you, of course, in that seat. But what about Selby and Ainsty, and what about Uxbridge? Pretty poor vote share there, 526 votes in Uxbridge.
Well, in both of those seats, we had fantastic candidates who had been in place for some time. They campaigned incredibly hard and had the support of our MPs as well. But the fact is that across this country, we have a broken electoral system, first past the post. And that means that Liberal Democrats, like every political party, we have to focus our resources on areas and in seats where we can win. And so we had to focus our resources on Somerton and Frome, and that's why we've got the stunning result there that we've achieved overnight.
It's interesting you mentioned fantastic candidates in certain constituencies, because I was looking a little bit about Sarah Dyke, the candidate, the now MP for Somerton and Frome. She was hidden away a bit from the media during the campaign, perhaps after one slightly awkward interview on a Guardian podcast. I think we've got a little clip that we can listen to of that now.
What do you want to know? Something, a subject that I don't know anything about. I'm not going to be able to give you an answer for very sensibly. On
the sort of general economic state of the constituency?
Well, I can talk. Yeah, I mean, there's pockets of deprivation. I mean, what else? You know, what can we say on that, really? I don't feel that I'm prepared at all for this, Amy. It's all getting a little bit above my station, sorry.
That was your candidate, Daisy Cooper, saying she couldn't talk about a very, very basic question about how rich her constituency is, that was above her station. Is this a competent Member of Parliament that's been elected?
Sarah's going to be an absolutely amazing Member of Parliament. I've got no doubt about that at all. Look, it's a very big thing. I think people don't realise it's a really big thing to put yourself forward to stand as an MP. That was a small interview. It was a small hiccup at the start of the campaign, but she's been out and about speaking to thousands and thousands of voters. She's done public hustings in the constituency, a number of those. She's done a number of fantastic interviews. I saw her interview on BBC News this morning and she absolutely smashed it out of the park. So, you know, she had a small hiccup at the beginning, but she's come back, she's dusted herself down, she's delivered a fantastic result, and I've got absolutely no doubt she's going to be an absolutely stonking MP for Somerton and Frome.
Well, let's hope so, because she's certainly going to have more media attention and more media interviews coming up, I'm sure. Just on that result, just lastly, I think, David Warburton, of course, was the MP for that area. He was embroiled in a drug and sex scandal of sorts. 15 months ago, I believe it was, he was suspended. How much do you think that has to do with the fact that the Liberal Democrats did so well?
Well, the main issues that we were picking up on the doorstep was the fact that people feel really abandoned by this Conservative government. The cost of living crisis and the NHS crisis were the two issues that kept coming up time and time and time again. And you will know, and your listeners and viewers will know, that Somerton and Frome is also a very rural area. People are fed up with not having any investment in the area. They're fed up with not having any buses. Farmers feel as though they've been incredibly let down by the botched Brexit deal that the government has struck as well. But there's no doubt that the scandals that you've referred to did play a part in the by-election, because local people felt like they've been unrepresented for almost an entire year, and that's why Sarah Dyke has pledged to become to be a hard-working local MP and to give people in Somerton and Frome the voice that they really deserve and really need right now.
Well, Daisy Cooper, thank you very much. And just very, very lastly, I wonder if you'd answer our question of the day. Is 25 too young to be a Member of Parliament?
No, I don't think it is at all. The fact is that young people say to me time and time again when I go into schools that they feel like their voice isn't being heard. They're incredibly worried about the climate crisis. They're worried about affordable housing. They're worried about mental health. I think it's really important that young people get involved in politics.
Well, Daisy Cooper, Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, thank you so much for your time this morning. There outside the Palace of Westminster, talking about that rather stonking by-election victory. And I really quite liked how Daisy Cooper used the word stonking when she was describing how Sarah Dyke will be as an MP. A stonking MP, she said.
A stonking MP. Smashing, I think she said also about her.
Yeah.
No, she smashed the interview.
She smashed the interview. She'll be a stonking MP. I'm loving the enthusiasm there. We need more of that in our politics.
And you won. With Daisy anyway, about the 25 years.
Yes. I'm looking forward to seeing some more views coming into the inbox. We'll no doubt be getting to those a little bit later in the programme. But let's get more now on this by-election fallout. We're joined by the political commentator, John Oxley. John, thank you for joining us here in the studio. It seems like this is, on the face of it, a fairly equitable outcome. One each for the three major parties in England.
Yes, it's a sort of ideal outcome. Everyone gets to come on and spin and say, well, we did well here, we maybe didn't do so well here. But, you know, when it comes to general elections, that's probably not how it's going to work. It's not going to be, whatever it is, 300 seats each.
Now, Thomas suggested that there could be a narrow path to victory for the Conservatives. What do you make of that?
I think it's a very narrow path, excuse me, because what you've seen here is the Conservatives have lost in a big head-to-head with Labour up in Selby. They've lost in a big head-to-head with the Liberal Democrats in the West Country.
Would you like a drink of water?
Yes, sorry,
Let's
I
pass
do
you a drink
apologise.
of water.
It happens to the best Prime Ministers during conference speeches as well, you know?
I do apologise for that. So, yeah, they've had this head-to-head with the Lib Dems. They've lost that. They're going to have a lot of seats like that. They've had a big head-to-head with Labour. And down in Uxbridge, it was a weird election. They fought that almost like a by-election. They weren't really... almost like a by-election would be fought by the opposition. They weren't really talking about their record in government. They were going out saying, we need to stop ULEZ, which, you know, is a London mayoral policy. And they were really fighting that like the outsiders. And it'd be hard to find a way to do that at a national election where they're the government. So I think there is a narrow path.
Is there perhaps a lesson here? If we look at how the Conservatives campaigned in the non-Uxbridge seats in this by-election, in Selby and in Somerton, they had very bland messages. There wasn't really a sort of clear policy prospectus that they were campaigning incredibly hard and incredibly clearly on. Now, in 2019, Get Brexit Done was the very simple message. In Uxbridge, Stop ULEZ was the very simple message. Is there a lesson here that the Conservatives just need a simple campaigning, preferably Conservative message to take to the electorate and that might see them through?
I think that's a very good way of approaching the next general election. I think you need something that sort of people who tune into the news for 5 minutes a day really pick up and run with. And that's what, in 2019, was done very well. Equally was done very well by Vote Leave when they delivered, you know, a quite surprising victory. I think the problem the Conservatives have at the moment is, they've been backwards and forwards over all sorts of policies over the last 13 years. There's not a clear faction in control of the Conservative Party, so it's going to be very hard to pull together, particularly in an election where people aren't necessarily optimistic about their chances. People are looking ahead potentially to a leadership election that comes afterwards, and they need to keep 650 candidates on message. So yes, a short, simple message that's very effective is how you win elections, but how do the Tories come up with that at the moment?
I wonder, after 13 years in government in one way or another, the Conservatives really do have a clear and succinct message of what voting Conservative means. Very difficult, considering the tax burden is so high, considering they haven't tackled illegal immigration in the way that they've hoped they could. So it'll be very difficult indeed to see what that big slogan will be and whether they come to something. But also in Uxbridge and Ruislip, this was Boris Johnson's seat. It has remained Conservative. Everyone seems to be saying, oh, this is all about ULEZ, anti-ULEZ, revolt against ULEZ, etc., etc. Is it down to that, or is Uxbridge just a very staunchly Conservative place?
I mean, it was the focus of the Tory campaign, but I think there's something in what you're saying. It's one of these interesting seats that on the surface looks like a marginal, but sort of always looks like a marginal where the Labour Party never quite get there. It was one of their targets in 2019. They kind of hoped about it in 2017. So I think there is something to be said that, particularly that area of North London is one of those seats that's remaining stubbornly Conservative. And really, you'd expect the Tories to be doing better than this, and so it does point ahead to trouble at the next general election.
And yet the majority in Uxbridge was only 7,000. The majority in the other two seats was 20,000. If anything, this should have been the seat that disappeared the fastest. Does this perhaps mean that the Conservatives actually have a fighting chance in London?
I think they have a fighting chance in those outer London seats, on the periphery. They are seats that should suit the Conservatives. They're generally sort of older seats. They're people who own their own homes and have done very well out of house price rises, and people who are concerned about things like motorists more than they're concerned about things like public transport. I doubt that really holds for some of the inner London seats. I think I'd be more worried if I was Greg Hands in Chelsea, or even some of the leafier South London suburbs.
Yeah, absolutely. And many have suggested that the Conservatives are having such troubles because there's something called Long Boris going about, which is the impact
Boris
of Boris
must be
Johnson.
delighted to be called Long Boris. He's famously quite a short man.
And this, of course, is a play on long COVID.
Yeah.
Boris Johnson and his legacy is lingering on. Do you think that's true? Because I think quite a lot of people still like Boris Johnson, even if they may not admit it.
Well, I think the polling sort of points away from there being this love for Boris remaining. I think a lot of the problems that the Conservative Party now have do kind of come in the wake of Boris Johnson's government and how chaotic it was, and particularly how he came in with this quite radical manifesto that was very different from what previous MPs had been elected on. So I think there is something in there that there was this sort of latent problem within the Conservative Party that Boris, by force of personality, was holding together, but now it's all come spilling out, and it's very hard for anyone to bottle up again.
Now we must turn to our question of the day, and I must say that the inbox has been lighting up with people getting in touch. Let's turn first to Lena, who's written in to say, I'm 17 years old, and say that 25 is far too young to be an MP. The guy has little to no experience. I'm not being rude or anything, but it's true. Well, Lena, thank you for watching. Gosh, that is
you know what John says?
strident opinion.
John says, and I think there's some truth to this. Daisy said young people need more representation regarding mental health and climate change. It makes young people sound like a load of snowflakes. She just needed to add in gender identity issues, and the Lib Dem future for the country would be complete. Well, there you go. It's, yes, only young people care about climate change. Only young people care about mental health.
Isn't that, to some extent, Emily, an extension of your argument, which is sort of, if you're older, you're definitely going to think sort of in a different sort of way. Is age always that qualifying factor? Or could it be that sometimes there are some rather brilliant young people, maybe rarely, I'm not saying we should have a House of Commons full of 25-year-olds, but maybe one or two of them out of 650. Is it really that egregious a thought?
I just don't like the way the House of Commons has changed demographically over the years. We've seen a move away from people who've ever had manual jobs, for example. We've seen a move away from working class. We've seen lots of people who have had PR jobs, PR experience, or have worked for an MP for a while, been a special advisor. Is that who we want representing us? I'm not sure that represents us.
But the average age of a member of parliament is in their 50s. So perhaps that sort of diversity is people who have different life experience through different things. But also, I hate to return to history, but Pitt the Younger is one of my favourite prime ministers ever. He famously defeated Napoleon through England's exertion and saved Europe through England's example. And he became a member of parliament at the age of 21, prime minister at the age of 24. His entire life was nothing but politics, but he was our second longest serving prime minister, and he did an absolutely fantastic job, apart from when he taxed windows. But for the most part,
This guy has spent more time at Oxford than he has doing anything else.
Well, shall we get a word from John Oxley finally on this topic? 25, too young?
I don't think so. I think it's all about quality and character.
I'm losing here.
You know, there have been, we've got lots of old MPs who aren't very good and are still clogging up the House of Commons. So I think it really is up to parties and voters to decide whether they think this person is credible or not.
Here's a point, and when it comes to quality, what I get very, very irritated by is politicians standing up at Prime Minister's questions, reading out a question, maybe it's a 20-second question, and they're standing there with bits of paper up to their face, reading like they're in a primary school. If they can't learn a 30-second question, they should not be elected, they should not be a Member of Parliament. That exercises me more than the age of an individual.
Right, and I think we've got Aubrey Allegretti on the line, do we?
Aubrey Allegretti, the senior political correspondent for The Guardian, can join us now. Aubrey, thank you for making the time for us this morning. First of all of the parties are spinning these results as good for them, as if they're sort of on the up. What's the truth of it?
Well, there is some truth in that there is something for everybody, but I think if you take all of the three results together and you try and take a little bit of a step back here, if you take all of this, you're looking at the Conservatives being down by about 21 points across the board. And that is not good news for them. And it means that, roughly speaking, the opinion polls, the national opinion polls that we've been seeing over the last few weeks are correct. Now, Rishi Sunak is right to say that few people expected the Conservatives to hold Uxbridge and South Ruislip. But that does still mean he's got big questions to answer about why the Conservatives are losing safe seats like Selby and Ainsty in his backyard in North Yorkshire.
It's been pointed out that voter turnout in Selby was very low indeed, 41.8% compared to 71% previously. So apparently that leaves 21,000 voters at home not bothering to turn up at the ballot box. Does that show that there isn't a massive enthusiasm for Keir Starmer's Labour?
There certainly could be that read into it. I mean, in 1997, there were lots of people who decided not to vote Labour and instead were Conservative voters who stayed at home. And that was part of what contributed to Tony Blair's massive landslide. So abstentions are certainly as damaging to the Conservative Party as people swinging the other way. Now, I spoke to lots of voters in Selby and Ainsty who didn't think they were going to vote. They weren't necessarily unhappy with Rishi Sunak's government, but they were very certainly unhappy with the departure of their sitting MP, Nigel Adams. And they sort of said to me they thought he was petulant, that he'd sort of resigned in a fit of rage, and they didn't feel the need to come out and support his successor. So there were a lot more kind of interesting factors, I think, about why Selby swung away from the Conservatives at this by-election.
Now, we've only got 20 seconds on this, Aubrey, so shortly, if you will, does that lack of enthusiasm, that lack of Starmer mania, did that lead to the Tory success in Uxbridge, where there's a sort of wedge issue they can get in, they can peel away that Labour lead?
I think the lesson for the Conservatives from Uxbridge will be that they think that they can campaign against Labour where it is in power. Now, obviously, in Uxbridge, there was a sitting Conservative MP, but they used that as a sort of bid to try and get people to voice their discontent against Sadiq Khan. So they'll be looking at other areas where Labour has a metro mayor, or indeed in Wales, where Labour is in control of the government. And those will be the areas they'll focus on to try and hone their attacks.
Well, Aubrey's left us, but we need to wrap up anyway. Thank you very much indeed, Aubrey.
Indeed, we'll be getting much more stuck into all of what's to come here. We're going to be talking to the professor, the psephologist extraordinaire, Sir John Curtis. We'll get his thoughts in just a few minutes' time. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Touch of a cool start where we've held on to clear skies overnight and there is a bit of sunshine around, but for Northern Ireland, Southern Scotland into Northern England it is quite cloudy from the word go. A few scattered showers in there. That cloud will be progressing its way across the rest of England and Wales throughout the day, so the sunshine perhaps turning a bit hazier later on. Best of the sunshine perhaps across southwestern areas of Scotland and the Northern Isles, actually starting to see a few sunnier spells developing, but will be a relatively cool day with that cloud around, temperatures between 16 and 22 degrees Celsius. This rain is also going to start spreading its way in as we do head throughout the night, so more patchy outbreaks pushing into northwest England and parts of Wales as well. Generally the far south of England and the northern areas of Scotland holding on to some of the clearer spells overnight. That will just allow those temperatures to drop off a touch, particularly in those sheltered glens of Scotland. But into the weekend, it is watching this low-pressure centre as it pushes its way in from the Atlantic, turning much more widely unsettled. Outbreaks of rain quickly spreading eastwards as we head throughout the day. A dry start across the very far south-east of England, but the rain will arrive here later on as well, even if it is relatively patchy. The winds strengthening across southern coast of England, potential for gales in places. Far north of Scotland, seeing the better conditions throughout the day with some sunshine as well. Again, relatively cool in places, but the humidity will also be rising, and it does stay unsettled throughout the second half of the weekend and into the start of the new working week as well. Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10 a.m. on the Friday the 21st of July. This is Britain's Newsroom here on GB News with me, Tom Harwood, and Emily Carver.
Thank you for joining us. So it's been a night of by-election drama for the three biggest parties in the country. We'll be joined by top pollster Sir John Curtis and Labour MP Steve McCabe for their thoughts.
And following their win in Somerton and Frome, we'll be hearing from the leader of the Liberal Democrats and seeing if he's got one of these big stunts that the Lib Dems like to pull whenever they win anything. Sir Ed Davey will be hearing from him later.
We shall see that. And tens of thousands of patients have had care disrupted due to a 48-hour strike by consultants, the first in decades, which began at 7 a.m. on Thursday. We'll be live from the picket line. And our big question of the day, is 25 years old too young to be an MP? I think it is. You don't have enough life experience, you probably haven't had a proper job.
I think it depends on the 25-year-old. What if there's a 25-year-old who left home at 12 and sort of was started a business, became a billionaire? You don't know the life story of someone who's 25. I think it matters more what you've done, perhaps even how you put yourself across and what you think, than how old you are.
And we're talking about this, of course, because the new Labour MP for Selby and Ainsty is a 25-year-old who hasn't done much apart from study and be a parliamentary researcher. But good on him, to be fair. Good on him.
He worked at the CBI for a bit, which, of course, is an organisation not at all ridden by scandal in the last... Anyway, we'll be discussing this more. We really want your views on this topic. Is 25 too young? gbviews@gbnews.com. But we'll get more on all of these big stories after your morning headlines.
Tom, thank you and good morning. It's 2 minutes past 10. This is the latest. Rishi Sunak has suffered a doubled by-election loss, with Labour and the Lib Dems both overturning majorities of about 20,000. Labour won Selby and Ainsty, and the Lib Dems took Somerton and Frome on sizable wins. The Prime Minister says the Conservatives' by-election victory in Uxbridge and South Ruislip, Boris Johnson's old seat, shows the next general election isn't a done deal. He's vowed to double down, stick to the plan and deliver for the people. Department stores and furniture sellers had a good month as sales were higher than expected in June. Figures from the ONS found the retail industry did better than expected last month. Sales in supermarkets were also a driving force behind the bounce back. It said these were partially offset by falls in fuel, garden centres and retail stores. Growth still fell annually, but at its slowest rate since the beginning of the Ukraine war. Tenants are feeling the squeeze as landlords in and outside of London increase rents by between £300 and £500 per year. Data from Rightmove says the average rent per month outside of London is just over £1,200, whilst rent in the capital reaches a record of just over £2,500 per month. For the second quarter of this year, rent outside the capital has increased by £308 from the same period in 2019, where the average price per month was £923. It also found the average property available to rent is finding a tenant in 17 days. That's the quickest time it's recorded since November last year. London rent has increased by £559. That's 28% in 4 years. Parents struggling with childcare will receive what the government is calling more properly and fairly funded support. Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, announced new measures in the budget in March, which will see some families claiming 30 hours of free childcare a week. From April next year, working parents of 2-year-olds will be able to access 15 hours of free childcare, to be extended to working parents of all children older than 9 months from September next year. The group CEO of NatWest, which includes Coutts, has apologised to Nigel Farage after his account was closed. Dame Alison Rose apologised for what she calls deeply inappropriate comments made about Mr Farage, now being published in papers. She continued saying it's not the company's policy to drop a customer on the basis of legally held political and personal views. A full review of Coutts' process on how these decisions are made will be carried out. Well, speaking on his show here on GB News last night, Nigel says questions remain for NatWest.
There's a reiteration of the offer to give me NatWest services. This offer was made verbally to me just before I went on air on GB News a couple of weeks ago. I also wonder, if I go to NatWest, how long will it be before they close me down? Because there's no guarantee that they'll keep me as a customer, and that does genuinely concern me.
The White House has confirmed Ukraine is using US cluster bombs against Russian forces in the country. National Security spokesperson John Kirby says they're being used effectively against Russian defence and operations. Cluster munitions, which are banned in more than 100 countries, release large numbers of smaller bombs that can kill over a wide area. Those that fail to explode pose a danger far into the future. The US agreed to supply them to boost Ukraine's ammunition supplies. And holidaymakers have been warned not to touch dead birds on Welsh beaches as concerns rise over a bird flu outbreak. In recent weeks, reports of bird carcasses washing up on shores in western North Wales have increased as wild bird colonies around the UK continue to be affected. The Welsh Climate Change Minister, Julie James, described the situation as heart-wrenching. She said it's important people don't help spread the disease further. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Emily and Tom.
Well, a very good morning to you. Welcome to Britain's Newsroom here on GB News. Thank you for your company this morning in what is quite an exciting post-by-election morning.
It is very exciting indeed. Lots of results to get through. I've been interested in the turnout. They have been rather low.
Traditionally, by-elections do not see high turnouts, but it is particularly interesting in some of these. They have been lower than average. And does that just mean that lots of Conservatives are sitting at home and thereby other people are winning by default, perhaps in 2 of those seats? We can dive into that.
I think a lot of people feel like they haven't got much to vote for. But anyway.
Well, it has been a night of by-election drama for those 3 biggest parties in the country. But let's zoom in now on the Lib Dems' newest West Country seat, Somerton and Frome, where Jeff Moody, our reporter, is. And Jeff, you've been there all morning. What's the mood like on the ground?
Well, we're just waiting for Sir Ed Davey to arrive when we're expecting that big stunt that you were talking about. They're all lined up behind me at the moment, ready for this big stunt. We don't quite know what it's going to be, but I've been told that it's known in Lib Dem circles as Operation Fromage. So I'm not quite sure whether it's going to be a big cheese or what it is, but we will find out in about half an hour. It's kind of reminiscent of the last by-election that was around a year ago in Tiverton and Honiton, when Richard Ford had a spectacular victory against the Conservatives there. Spectacular, obviously, depending on your point of view. But Richard joins me now. I've just dragged him out of the stunt. Hello to you, Richard.
Hello, yeah, good to see you again.
Nice to see you too. So you're not now alone as a single Lib Dem voice in the southwest.
Absolutely, I have company in the West Country. So along with my colleague from Bath, I have a colleague in Somerset, and of course Somerset for the Liberal Democrats is our traditional heartland, and I think we could be seeing others joining us next year.
Well, exactly, because your election victory was a bit of a shock, wasn't it? It was one of the first sort of nails in Boris Johnson's coffin, wasn't it? It was the beginning of the end for him, that very famous door with "Show Boris the Door" that you unveiled. This now is not so much a shock, this is more of a habit, isn't it? It is beginning to look as though the Lib Dems are making making ground in the southwest like they had done in the 80s, the 90s and the early 2000s.
That's right. You can see the trend. This is our fourth parliamentary by-election win of this parliament, and it builds on top of the other by-election successes in North Shropshire and Cheshire and Amersham. We control the council here in Somerset, and there's a real sense where the Liberal Democrats are very much back and on the up in the West Country.
Looking at the other MPs in the area, in the southwest, which ones do you think should now be looking over their shoulder and being worried about the Lib Dems come election time?
Well, although I'm not going to name any specific names of my Conservative colleagues...
Go on, you know you want to.
What I can tell you is that there are 15 Conservative MPs in the southwest who have majorities that are smaller than the one that Sarah Dyke overturned last night at our by-election here in Somerton and Frome. So I think there will be quite a few Tory MPs looking over their shoulders and being rather worried about their fragile majorities this morning.
If you're a betting man, how many seats do you think that the Lib Dems will get come the election? Down here, this way.
I'm not a betting man, but when I was first able to vote in 1997, you could walk from St Ives to Frome on Lib Dem-held territory, and I think we're definitely going to see something of a resurgence for the Liberal Democrats here in the West Country.
So the punishment that the Lib Dems received in 2015, the real pushback against Nick Clegg and the coalition, do you think voters down here have now forgotten that? Do you think they've moved on from that?
Well, I think voters who were talking to me on doorsteps here when I was out knocking on doors, and also in my own patch in East Devon and Mid Devon, they're telling me that of recent years they feel that the Conservatives have mismanaged the economy and mismanaged the National Health Service. And for many people in the West Country, they have fond memories of having Liberal Democrat representation. There is still actually a lot of respect for the solid local MPs who we had representing the Liberal Democrats in the West Country prior to 2015. And I think what we're seeing is that those memories being invoked, people remembering just how it was to be well represented, and they want to see that again.
OK, and in a word, we know that we've got Operation Fromage about to happen. What exactly is Operation Fromage? What's the stunt?
I'm afraid you're going to have to wait for your West Country cheddar.
Oh, I knew he'd say that. Richard, thank you very much indeed. I'll let you get on. Well, yes, we're expecting that stunt any minute now, so we will keep you informed when it happens.
Well, Jeff, we will be right back to you when the big cloth is going to be unveiled. I'm looking forward to...
I can hardly contain my excitement.
Operation Fromage. Oh, goodness me. Jeff, thank you very much.
Is there anything more Liberal Democrat than Operation Fromage?
It's interesting because...
A nod to the European Union, perhaps.
The Southwest was a big Brexit voting area, but it seems that the Lib Dems in the locality don't really talk about Brexit that much in their literature.
Oh, Somerton and Frome, the Liberal Democrats, I mean, the amount of flyers that were going out, I mean, they really do bombard people with their literature.
But as the Tiverton and Honiton Lib Dem MP Richard Ford was just saying there, he was talking about the NHS, he was talking about waiting times, he was talking about the economy. Not a single mention of Brexit. Perhaps they've moved on.
I think so.
But let's get a little bit more with the pollster extraordinaire, the mastermind psephologist, Professor Sir John Curtis, delighted to say can join us now. And Sir John, we're sort of looking at these by-elections in isolation, because ultimately by-elections don't always tell us what happens at the general election, but they can give us some clues. What were the clues that we learnt last night?
Well, you're certainly right. We shouldn't be looking to by-elections to forecast the outcome of a general election, but we can look at historical precedent. And unfortunately for the Conservatives, the historical precedents are not very kind to them. Well, first of all, as Richard Ford was just mentioning, the Liberal Democrats have now gained 4 seats from the Conservatives in this parliament in 3 cases, including Somerton and Frome last night, at near record-breaking swings. The last time the Liberal Democrats won 4 seats off the Conservatives in a parliament was the parliament of 1992 to 1997, which ended in defeat for the Conservatives. Meanwhile, the swing in Selby and Anstey at around 24% is the second highest swing ever from Conservative to Labour. The one better one than this was in the 92 to 97 Parliament, and there are a couple of others that Labour achieved in that Parliament, again on a similar scale. And Labour have not done anything like that in a by-election since. So again, the precedents, the 1992-97 Parliament that ended in Conservative defeat. Now, no guarantee that history is going to repeat itself, but it is a further indication of the scale of the task that faces Rishi Sunak if he's going to get his party back into a position where it might have a chance of winning the next general election.
So, John, when we analyse by-election results and any result, we like to look at things that might be surprising or people might have not anticipated. Is there anything from the election results yesterday, from yesterday's election, that was a little bit surprising?
Oh, sure. The fact that the Conservatives managed to hang on to the seat in Uxbridge was not widely anticipated, although it was thought, for a variety of reasons, that the swing from Conservative to Labour might be less there than in Selby, though in the end the swing in Selby was probably well beyond most people's expectations. And that, of course, then leads to an interesting debate about why it happened. Well, if we take the word of the successful new Conservative MP, the explanation lies in the Conservatives' ability to focus on the proposed extension by Sadiq Khan, the Labour London Mayor, of the low emission vehicle scheme to the outer London boroughs, and that the Conservatives were campaigning against this on the grounds that people who suddenly discover that they have vehicles that would incur a charge, that this was unfair on them. He certainly didn't think there was anything to do with the voters of Uxbridge thinking that perhaps Mr. Sunak was beginning to turn things around. Now, he might be right, he might be wrong, but certainly it does look like a somewhat exceptional result. Now, that said, clearly there is a question for Labour as to why, even if indeed the explanation lies primarily in the debate about the ULEZ zone, is why was Labour's campaign upended by the Conservative focus on that issue? If Labour's command over voters, according to the opinion polls, is indeed a solid command, you might expect the party to be able to cope and deal with that and still manage to win the by-election. And I think as a result, that debate, which is bubbling on inside the Labour Party, and we saw some of it emerge with the argument about whether it should or should not end the 2-child limit on the provision of welfare benefits, that I think the debate about whether or not the safety first policy that Sir Keir seems to be keen on, whether the problem with that is that while voters might readily come to Labour, perhaps there's also a risk they might readily go as well.
Is that potentially the difference between the 1990s and today? In the 1990s, the Conservative Party became more and more unpopular, but it wasn't just that. Tony Blair was a very popular national figure, somewhat surprising perhaps for people today, but he was there was this sort of hero worship around him and his personality, which we're really not seeing with Sir Keir Starmer. Does that mean that Labour's lead is a lot softer than many people would assume?
Well, it's certainly the case that Sir Keir is not anything like as popular as Tony Blair was before 1997. And, other things being equal, that means it's somewhat less likely that Labour are going to get their message across because people are less likely to listen. Indeed, one of the characteristics that people mention when they're asked about what they think about Sir Keir Starmer is they do tend to find him rather boring and insipid. So again, not necessarily the best vehicle for getting your message across. But the other trick that Tony Blair managed to pull off is that although indeed New Labour were also chasing the centre, they did manage to create a sense of excitement that indeed, to use the phrase they had, things can only get better. And by implication, they said that things will get better. Yeah. I think the challenge that Labour face, and it's not simply of their own making, because the fiscal situation now is so much more difficult than it was before the 1997 general election, Labour is having to work out how, as an opposition, it can persuade voters that it might be able to do things better, while at the same time being cognizant of the fact that there isn't much money to spend, and that therefore a new government is going to be heavily constrained about what it can do. So that's undoubtedly a dilemma for Labour. So, but in the meantime, chasing the centre and not saying too much, well, some of Sir Keir Starmer's critics will say that isn't necessarily the way to cement the loyalty of voters.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Sir John Curtis there, taking us through the election results from yesterday.
I love talking to Sir John Curtis. It always feels like, for any sort of political geek, it's sort of a moment of,
He has a brain the size of a planet.
He does, and he just looks the part, doesn't he?
He does.
He's a proper politics boffin.
You can trust his facts and figures, you certainly can.
Well, let's get some more news on the ground now, because, of course, there is this sort of variation around the country.
Yes, the Tories have managed to defend Boris Johnson's seat, Uxbridge and South Ruislip. So Paul Hawkins is live from Boris Johnson's former seat. Thank you very much indeed, Paul. So, have you been speaking to people there? What's going on?
Yeah, I've been speaking to people here after that. Frankly surprising, as Sir John Curtis was just pointing out, surprising result here in Uxbridge. The Conservatives holding on by just 495 seats. There was a little bit of drama in the middle of the night. They had to recount the votes. But that said, there was a 6.7% swing towards Labour, just not enough to get Labour over the line. And the big difference between the election here and the one in Somerset and in North Yorkshire is local election issues, or we should just say issue, and that is ULEZ, which, for those who don't know, ultra-low emission zone. That is the daily charge that high-polluting vehicles have to pay to enter the centre of London, and the London Mayor Sadiq Khan wants to extend the boundary to outer London in August, and that is the subject at the moment of a judicial review, a challenge by 5 London councils and Surrey County Council. Indeed, one of those 5 London councils is Hillingdon Borough Council, where we are at the moment. That was the issue that pretty much all the candidates campaigned on. It put Labour in a difficult position, given it's what Sadiq Khan wants to do. The local candidate here, Danny Beale, said he doesn't agree with the extension because it's against the cost of living, but it's definitely an issue that has unified voters on both sides. So have a listen to David and Nick. David, a lifelong Conservative voter, voted Tory again last night. Nick voted for Labour because of a police station closure issue, but both are agreed about ULEZ. Have a listen.
Because people can't pay £12.50 a day, whatever it is, to go backwards and forwards.
There needs to be, if it comes into this area, there's got to be a longer extension to allow people to get their vehicles sorted out. Yep. It must be 3 years, rather than 9 months. 9 months is just farcical. And it wasn't 9 months when he extended it to the North and South Circular. He gave people a lot more time.
Yeah, so where does this leave Labour? They're going to have to rethink their election strategy in London in the build-up to next year's general election, and indeed the London mayoral election. Gives more hope as well to the Conservative candidate Susan Hall that they can use ULEZ, I should say, to gain some political leverage.
Well, Paul Hawkins, thank you very much for those views on the ground. It's fascinating the way that the Labour Party has sort of tried to sit on both sides of the fence on this issue. Really interesting to see what they'll do.
And the Conservatives have clung on by just a few hundred votes.
Indeed, indeed. Well, still lots more to come. In a few moments, we'll be joined by Steve McCabe, the Labour MP from Birmingham Sellyoak, for his thoughts on these extraordinary by-election results. Stick with us.
That'll be good.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Touch of a cool start where we've held on to clear skies overnight and there is a bit of sunshine around, but for Northern Ireland, Southern Scotland into Northern England, it is quite cloudy from the word go. A few scattered showers in there. That cloud will be progressing its way across the rest of England and Wales throughout the day, so the sunshine perhaps turning a bit hazier later on. Best of the sunshine perhaps across southwestern areas of Scotland and the Northern Isles, actually starting to see a few sunnier spells developing, but will be a relatively cool day with that cloud around, temperatures between 16 and 22 degrees Celsius. This rain is also going to start spreading its way in as we do head throughout the night, so more patchy outbreaks pushing into northwest England and parts of Wales as well. Generally the far south of England and the northern areas of Scotland holding on to some of the clearer spells overnight. That will just allow those temperatures to drop off a touch, particularly in those sheltered glens of Scotland. But into the weekend, it is watching this low-pressure centre as it pushes its way in from the Atlantic, turning much more widely unsettled. Outbreaks of rain quickly spreading eastwards as we head throughout the day. A dry start across the very far southeast of England, but the rain will arrive here later on as well, even if it is relatively patchy. The winds strengthening across southern coast of England, potential for gales in places. Far north of Scotland, seeing the better conditions throughout the day with some sunshine as well. Again, relatively cool in places, but the humidity will also be rising, and it does stay unsettled throughout the second half of the weekend and into the start of the new working week as well. Bye-bye.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Da-da-da-da-dum, etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant, agreed. My superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
It is 10:28 in the morning. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Tom Harwood and me, Emily Carver.
And it's not just by-elections that we're talking about today, although they are important. There is other news too. On the debanking scandal that's rumbled on for several days now, it's taken the news by storm this week. The NatWest CEO, Dame Alison Rose, in a public statement and letter to Nigel Farage, has apologised for deeply inappropriate comments and the way Coots broke ties with the former UKIP and Brexit Party leader.
This comes after it was revealed a 410-page internal report by the NatWest subsidiary Labour...
Emily, I'm just going to interrupt you there because we can go live to the leader of the Liberal Democrats. We'll get back to Nigel's story in a little bit, but we're looking at this Lib Dem announcement. Let's cross over.
Short of spectacular. And what's particularly exciting for me is to see the Liberal Democrats winning again in our old Liberal heartlands in the southwest. May last year, Somerset Council. Devon last year, Tiverton Honiton, where we won that famous historic by-election. And this May, in Devon, 3 council victories. And now here in Somerset with our historic by-election victory. You know, the trend was clear. The trend was clear even before last night, but now it's certain. The Liberal Democrats are back in the West Country. And it's a real pleasure for me today to celebrate this victory with Lady Jane Ashdown. Paddy would have been so pleased and proud of our results last night. And I've spoken to a lot of people in this by-election across Somerton and Frome, indeed in the local elections this year across the country. And people are angry. They're angry while they're working hard to make ends meet, angry while they're trying to get a GP appointment or a dentist for their child. The Conservatives are so out of touch, they've not even noticed. They're fed up of these Conservative clowns in their political circus not helping people. And that's why thousands of lifelong Conservatives are switching to the Liberal Democrats. Why thousands of lifelong Labour voters have lent us their support to beat the Conservatives. And I think it's why people from all backgrounds, all walks of life, are turning to the Liberal Democrats. They see that we're listening to them and we're fighting for a fair deal for them. Last night, the people of Somerton and Frome spoke for the whole country, and they sent a powerful message to this appalling Conservative government. Ringmaster Rishi is out of ideas, he's out of touch, and he is out of excuses. It's time for his shameful spectacle to end. It's time for a general election to end this Conservative circus. It's time to get these clowns out of number 10.
Well, there we go. That was the leader of the Lib Dems. He's about to perform a stunt. Let's have a little watch. Next to his big cannon, for those listening on the radio, he's lighting a metaphorical cardboard cannon.
Let's hope it lights.
He's trying to light it there. He's hoping it lights. It says, "Get these clowns out of number 10."
Oh, it has actually lit.
Oh.
There's a little
5,
there.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Confetti has exploded out of the end of this cardboard cannon that reads, "Get these clowns out of number 10.
Gosh, the Liberal Democrats know how to have a good time, don't they?
Lots of
celebrating their wins.
Orange stars across a blue cannon.
And
now
there's Sarah Dyke, the Liberal Democrat MP. She is, well, basking in the glory.
In confetti that has just been set off by this pretend cannon. My goodness, they do like a stunt there, don't they? Well, there was...
I like that, you know.
It's more fun. I hope it's biodegradable paper. The former Environment Minister there, Ed Davey, creating lots of litter on the floor.
Well, you'd hope so, because Somerton and Frome is an absolutely beautiful area of the country and somewhere where you would not like to see litter remain for very long.
Definitely, Dot. Did you know what? I found something interesting about this cannon as well. blue with orangey yellow stars. Is that a hint at the European Union? Could it be?
It could be. We do know
It's
that
a
the Liberal
subtle-
Democrats still very much hold on to the European Union, do they not?
They do. What is your favourite Lib Dem stunt? What they've done is they've done Show Boris the Door. They had a big door. They had, what was the other one? Burst Boris's bubble. They burst a big balloon.
Oh, I remember that one. I did like that.
Yeah.
I did like that. Although someone has emailed in saying that Ed Davey is a non-entity. Well, today is his day. Today is his big day. You know, they don't win that many seats, do they, come the general election? But they do clean up often when it comes to by-elections and council elections. That's where they do well. And yes, Ed Davey looking very chipper indeed.
Let's hope we're cleaning up the floor there, now strewn with confetti. Goodness me. Well, no, I think that was important to watch. I think it is nice to look at their stunts and pranks.
Perhaps you at home voted Liberal Democrat this time around, wanted to give the Tories a bit of a kicking, weren't taken by Labour.
I just wish that the Conservatives in Uxbridge would do a sort of big metaphorical Ulez. I don't know what would be the Ulez metaphor that they could do. Sort of pushing back against. Maybe they bring in an old banger, a car. Rishi Sunak turns up in sort of a classic DeLorean, which would be.
It would have to be a white van. Come on, Tom.
Okay, you're so right.
It would have to be a white van.
My head's stuck in Back to the Future. I saw an article about which sort of cars would be paying the £12.50. Anyway, there we go. That's what's happening in Somerton and Frome. But before we cut live to Ed Davey there, we were talking about Nigel's bank account, because, of course, the NatWest subsidiary he was banking with labelled Mr Farage as a grifter, xenophobic and racist views. Now, Nigel has called called the apology that NatWest has now given him a start, but nowhere near enough.
Joining us now to discuss this is Dr Andrew Lillico from Europe Economics. Andrew, what do you make of this whole story, this episode? Nigel Farage has now received an apology. Some are saying it doesn't go far enough.
I think we should make a distinction here between what's desirable from a general policy perspective, and it's not desirable that people with Nigel Farage's sort of political points of view can't access banking services, and criticism specifically of how Coutts has conducted itself, given what the regulatory framework was. Because Coutts faced a problem, and I think that people haven't really recognised the commercial situation that Coutts faced. Coutts, if you go back some decades, was known as perhaps a rather kind of Swiss-style, asks no questions, traditional bank that provided banking services for, it was known to provide banking services for people like General Pinochet and other dictators. It's tried to reposition itself in recent years away from that kind of ask no questions image into being more equality, diversity and inclusion friendly, seeking after what one might think of as a woke pound or a woke dollar from the kind of Zuckerberg, younger, more issues-oriented banking services seekers. And if it was going to get money from those kinds of people, which it was seeking to reposition to do, it was difficult for it to be known as Farage's banker. I think it's undoubtedly
was it
the
known
case
as that,
that given
Andrew,
its commercial strategy,
Andrew, sorry to
being
interrupt
known
you,
as
but
Farage's bank was
Andrew,
likely to be commercially damaging to them.
Andrew, very sorry, but was it known as being Nigel Farage's bank? Did any of us really know it was his bank until, well, it came up in the media?
He revealed it was he banked with Coutts in an interview himself some years ago. So he was known to bank with Coutts. He was perhaps their most famous of their current people that banked with them. And so I don't think there's any doubt that he would be known. Also, if he, insofar as that was a public knowledge, that would provide a difficulty for them in repositioning themselves in the way that they were seeking to reposition themselves. So their Reputational Risk Committee's assessment that there was a commercial threat associated with being associated with Nigel Farage, I think is undoubtedly correct. Now, that positioning of being associated with them created a problem for them. They were allowed in that circumstance to dissociate themselves from him. Perhaps they shouldn't have been allowed to do that. But had they not chosen to dissociate themselves from him, given that he provided this difficulty, that was going to be commercially damaging to them. Yes. Now, we might think that it's a very undesirable world we have in which smears and potentially...
Andrew, sorry, we are very short on time here. I just want to ask you this particular question, which is, if if a private bank, they're not breaking the law by getting rid of Nigel Farage, but it does appear they did lie to him. They did lie to him about why he was removed, and then they briefed the BBC about his personal financial details. Whilst removing him as a customer may not have been illegal, this secret briefing to the BBC and this perhaps opaque way in which they operate, that seems more dodgy.
Absolutely. So insofar as they've given a false representation in a kind of publicity battle with Farage about why they removed him, then that would clearly be improper. Nobody's going to defend lying about why you do things. But I think that one should distinguish that from the policy position. And I think if one thinks about the question of is it something which we want companies in general to be able to do, because it's not only banks, it's not only Coots, it's lots and lots of companies adopt these kinds of woke approaches, and consumers are very sensitive when they don't. We only have to go back. I mean, it's not even a new thing. If you go back into the 1990s, for example, there was the Brent Spar affair where Shell faced consumer activism because it wasn't behaving in a way regarded as environmentally friendly. If companies don't do these things, they bear a commercial cost, and that's something that we have chosen as a society to do. I think that it's also the
sorry,
case.
we're going to have to leave it.
It's been suggested that you can't
We
access
had to
banks.
interrupt some of our time with Ed Davey, with Sarah Davey, but thank you so much for your views this morning. We'll be getting more on all of these topics.
Very interesting indeed. I want my businesses to offer a service or a product.
Well, we'll be back with more of this after this very short break.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel, sort of find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Very good morning to you. It's 10:44 and this is Britain's Newsroom here on GB News with me, Tom Harwood, and Emily Carver.
Yes, so you've been getting in touch thick and fast about our big question of the day. Is 25 years old too young to become an MP? I think it is a bit too young. And I don't think you have enough life experience myself.
I think we should have a diversity of MPs. We should have MPs in their 80s, we should have MPs in their 20s. Probably the majority of MPs should come somewhere in between the two. But having people on each end, a smattering, it's no bad thing.
You're always so balanced, Tom. Anyway, what have you been saying at home? Pat says, by the age of 25, Winston Churchill had joined the army, written 3 books, participated in 4 wars on 3 continents and conducted a daring escape after being captured by the Boers. Compare this with the average 25-year-old life experience today. That's a comment, of course, on what Tom was saying.
Yes, that Winston Churchill became an MP at the age of 25. I'm not saying every 25-year-old MP will be a Winston Churchill. I think that's quite a rare thing in history. But yes, no, I do take the point. Although Councillor Aled has written in, hello, good morning, Councillor, to say that he was elected in 2022 at the age of 25 and faced similar comments. It's not about age, it's about what you can bring to the table, says Councillor Aled. And I think that is a very fair point.
So am I just being cruel? Let me know if you think I'm just being a bit mean.
Well,
maybe I'm just jealous.
gbviews@gbnews.com. One other one that caught my eye, actually, was from Jacqueline, who wrote in to say that my father became an MP and baby of the house in 1948 when he was 25 years old.
Yes, baby in the house is the technical term, isn't it?
Yes,
for the
youngest MP. Whereas the father of the house isn't the oldest MP. It's the MP who's served there the longest.
And it was Kenneth Clarke.
It was. It is now. Oh goodness me.
Come on,
no. I do know. It'll come to me. Anyway,
we'll let you know later. Email us.
Gosh, that's embarrassing, isn't it? But Jacqueline has said that during the by-election he personally visited every house in the constituency. I think that would be just about impossible now. I mean, the average constituency these days is about 70,000 voters. I've just been. Harriet Harman, of course, is the mother of the house. Is she also the? No, I think there is a father of the house as well.
Well, this brings us to the papers.
Sorry, I'm just talking completely off screen. We should welcome everyone into the discussion now. We're doing a news review, and I'm delighted to be joined by Alice Denby and by Kevin Craig. Let's start off on this question. Actually, Kevin Craig, you were just pointing out to me. You wrote in your notes Harriet Harman, the mother of the house, the longest-serving woman, but that wasn't really a position until very recently.
Yeah, I'm not sure actually if there is who the father still is, but yeah, she's the longest-serving, elected in '83 originally. And on the point of 25, I mean, look, you can fly planes at 25, you can operate in hospitals. I think you're just being very mean there, Emily. And I was first elected a councillor at 25. You, Tom, stood to be a councillor unsuccessfully.
Only as a paper candidate.
Indeed, but you were young. You were young.
I did a friend to a favour.
Yeah. So you were young. So you've lived what you're saying, and I think.
Do you know the funny thing is, I didn't even get to vote for myself because I spent the whole day campaigning in a completely different part of the country. But
lesson learned.
I think it's more just young people these days. I don't think have the life experience. You know, this chap. Well done to him. Good job, Alice. But, he was a parliamentary researcher and a SPAD, I believe, and 3 years at Oxford takes you to 25.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's perfectly fine to have young people in the House of Commons, especially when we've got such terrible generational inequality. Young people don't vote enough, right? So their interests don't get represented enough in Parliament. Yeah. I think a bigger problem is that if you look at what happens to young MPs in Parliament, if you look at, like, Deanna Davidson and Myrie Black, they're all quitting because it's such a terrible job. So I hope this guy has an all right time when he gets to the Commons.
Well, he might only be there for a matter of months, of course, when the next general election comes.
You think?
Well,
you reckon?
Mate, I don't know.
Swing back?
Sometimes by-elections do peculiar things, and of course this was a 20,000 majority.
Yeah.
If the Labour Party wins every seat up to a 10,000 majority, this guy still doesn't hold his seat next time. Maybe he will. Maybe he'll embed himself over the next few
enough
months.
of that.
But,
let's get to other news.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's get to other news. Alice, The Times front page. NatWest's boss says sorry over Farage row. We were just talking to Andrew about this.
Yeah, I think this is a well-deserved apology. I think he's been treated extremely badly. I think the wider significance of this, whatever you think about Nigel Farage personally, I think the wider significance of this is a real problem. It's a kind of problem with capitalism itself. So Coutts is what's called a B Corp, and these are kind of companies that say that as well as making profits, they need to kind of promote inclusive values and you know, climate change and all of these things. The idea that a bank like Coutts, where you need £1 million just to start as an inclusive organisation, is frankly a joke. But I also think this takes us away from the whole point of how markets and businesses should work. They should be caring about making a profit and giving their customers a good service, not trying to promote woke values.
It's interesting, although what Andrew Lillico was saying was that perhaps it is the market strategy of Coutts. Perhaps they're chasing after the new sort of tech elite who do have woke values. They want the CEOs of these, I don't know, apps and websites to come on board and bank with them. Maybe that's what they're getting at, Kevin.
Well, I think, look, I told Coutts early on that they should do this. It's great that they've apologised. It was a mistake to have somebody at head office writing a 40-page dossier about Nigel, all of which is easily findable on the internet. And, you know, Coutts are a very progressive bank. I would disagree with Alice there that... But, you know, capitalism is about making money, and I'm a firm believer in it and creating a business worth millions, employing a lot of people. But nowadays, a lot of people, perhaps not always on this station, but do want businesses to have regard for the environment and care for their employees. So, you know...
Well, hang on. Are people who dispute net zero as an aim, or who backed Brexit, or who believe in strong borders and are angry about illegal migration, for example, are they just, you know, something for businesses to turf out?
No, I didn't say that, Emily. What I said was it was a mistake by Coutts. You know, Nigel has done nothing illegal. He's not taken any Russian money. He hasn't broken any laws, and he's a master of PR. And I knew this. He was going to spank Coutts, or you know, and it was so obvious. This was a mistake.
Do you know what? I feel very embarrassed. I've just been told in my ear Sir Peter Bottomley is the father of the house, and of course he is. I see him at Prime Minister's questions. He sits there in the little corner. Yeah, no, Sir Peter Bottomley, great man, father of the house. Anyway, shall we get on to some more stories? Because, Kevin, you've picked up something about tax breaks for office checkouts.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is raising temperatures here today. I'm just looking at the story on my phone. Forgive me, but I think it's important. So my background is obviously supporting the Labour Party, and but when the government does things that I think are sensible, and what this front page story in the Times today is basically saying that there are going to be tax breaks given to businesses and workers if staff get more regular health checks, because we as a country, I think we might all agree, there's too many people off sick. 2.5 million long-term sickness. It's gone up by 400,000 since COVID. So, you know, a good move, in my opinion, by the government to try and reduce sickness levels.
Yeah, no, I think that seems very reasonable.
Yes, people have been calling Britain Sick Note Britain.
I wonder how much of it is legitimate, though. I do sometimes think, are all of these people who say that they're suddenly ill, is that 100% the case? But hey, maybe
yes, the rates of long COVID are double the average, I believe, in the civil service.
Do you know, this is the point, isn't it? It's interesting, if you look at the number of sick days in the public sector versus the private, it's much higher, and you have to wonder why that is.
It's very funny. There are all sorts of correlations with people who say they have long COVID. The most peculiar one that the United States found was that if you identify as bisexual, you are far more likely to have long COVID. And perhaps it's just the way that people's minds work if they feel like they're more open to experience and thinking that they're more, oh, I've got a bit of a tickly cough, maybe I've got long COVID, maybe I should try. I don't know. But that is
they want to try a bit of that
genuinely a correlation that they found. And interestingly, it doesn't work with, you know, straight, gays and lesbians don't have that correlation, but bisexuals peculiarly do, which does lead me to think that maybe long COVID isn't quite as legitimate as some people claim.
Please do let us know at home if you are of that sexuality and you have long COVID. We'd like to see some evidence to back up that rather bizarre claim.
It's not my claim. It's the claim of the US government. But Alice, slightly more serious story now. Prince Andrew visited Jeffrey Epstein's place when he was under arrest.
Where do you start with this? I mean, Prince Andrew visited Jeffrey Epstein when he was under arrest for sex offences. I mean, this man's judgment is just... I just don't know what to say about this. It's disgraceful, and it also reveals that in his notorious interview with Emily Maitlis that he lied. He said he had only met Jeffrey Epstein on one occasion. These court documents reveal it was more than once. And I mean, this is just disgraceful. I think that this man deserves to be expelled from public life.
I mean, to some extent, he has been, though. There was the big furore about him automatically becoming one of the 4 people that was going to take on. But then the King expelled him from that, quite rightly, in my view. Kevin, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, Andrew, sadly for him on a human level, but he was a danger to the institution of the monarchy. He didn't represent British values of honesty, decency, and he has been effectively already ostracised by the royal family. And, you know, my day job is in public relations, and Andrew's interview on Newsnight is one of the worst broadcast television interventions in the history of TV. And, you know, this further revelation just shows that he will remain on the sidelines of public life forever now.
Yeah, I think that's for sure.
Well, on that note, Kevin Craig and Alice Denby, thank you so much for talking us through those stories. We'll see more of you in the next hour. But my gosh, there's so much more to come. More by-election intrigue and indeed other stories too. Stick with us here on Britain's Newsroom.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Sunny spells in 1 or 2 spots today, but quite a few showers once again, and then turning more generally unsettled later as some weather systems move in, and they're going to bring a breezy and damp weekend, certainly through much of Saturday. Ahead of those weather systems, showers breaking out, especially across northern Scotland, into parts of southern Scotland, northern England, the Midlands and Wales. Further south, fewer showers, although you wouldn't rule them out completely. A better chance of seeing some sunny spells, the brightest skies though, southwest Scotland, Cumbria, Devon and Cornwall. Well, we see some brightness, high teens, low 20s, but still feeling on the cool side in the north of Scotland with the breeze, and Northern Ireland as more persistent rain sets in by the end of the afternoon. That spreads more widely into western Scotland, northwest England and West Wales by the end of the night. And with the cloud and rain moving in, well, it's going to be a slightly milder night. But we'll see some clear spells towards the southeast and the north of Scotland, where it will be a chilly start. And actually Scotland, the north at least, seeing plenty of bright weather throughout Saturday. Elsewhere, we've got rain on and off spreading across the country. That rain will be heavy and persistent, particularly over western hills and coasts. And it will be breezy around southwestern coasts with gales in exposed spots. So all in all, an unsettled day to come and feeling very much on the cool side.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle. I know, yeah. Please stop. Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant Reed,
my superstar panel that are already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
A very good morning to you. It's 11 o'clock on Friday the 21st of July and it's by-election bonanza day here on Britain's Newsroom with me, Tom Harwood, and Emily Carver.
As Rishi Sunak narrowly avoided a total wipeout last night, we ask, is there a narrow path to general election victory for the Tories?
And as Labour achieves their biggest by-election swing since the days of Tony Blair, we ask, can Starmer fill that man's boots?
Now, and as promised, Tom Harwood will be eating his hat live on air, so you're going to stick around.
I slightly regret this late-night tweet last night. I perhaps underestimated.
Well, the
Conservatives.
Tories held a single seat, so there you go. You've got to do it. I will make sure he does it.
Yeah, that's coming up very, very soon. But of course, the question of the day we're asking is 25 too young to become an MP? Of course, the Labour MP, Keir Mather, was elected last night. He's the tender age of 25. I say that as a 26-year-old. But my goodness, should 25-year-olds be entering Parliament? gbviews@gbnews.com is the address to email. But before we get to all of that, let's have a little catch-up with the latest news headlines.
Tom, thank you very much and good morning. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Rishi Sunak has suffered a double by-election loss, with Labour and the Liberal Democrats both overturning majorities of about 20,000. Labour won Selby and Ainsty and the Lib Dems took Somerton and Frome on sizable swings. The Prime Minister says the government's by-election, the Conservatives' by-election victory in Uxbridge and South Ruislip, Boris Johnson's old seat, shows the next general election isn't a done deal. He said the defeats were far from favourable, but he plans to double down and deliver for the people. Department stores and furniture sellers had a good month as sales were higher than expected in June. Figures from the Office for National Statistics found the retail industry did better than expected last month. Sales in supermarkets were also a driving force behind the bounce back. Growth still fell annually, but at its slowest rate since the beginning of the Ukraine war. Tenants are feeling the squeeze as landlords in and outside of London increase rents by between £300 and £500 per year. The average asking price for rents outside of London has risen by £308, with an average price per month of £1,200, while landlords in the capital have increased their asking price by £559, with the average monthly rent at just over £2,500. Fixed mortgage rates have risen again after a brief fall. Finance information company Moneyfacts found the average two-year homeowner mortgage rate on the market edged back up to 6.8% today from 6.79% yesterday. The fleeting dip was the first time average mortgage rates had fallen for months. Five-year fixes have also risen slightly back to 6.32%, up from 6.31% on Thursday. Parents struggling with childcare will receive what the government calls more properly and fairly funded support. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt announced new measures in the budget in March, which will see some families claiming 30 hours of free childcare a week. From April next year, working parents of 2-year-olds will be able to access 15 hours of free childcare to be extended to working parents of all children older than 9 months old from September next year. Now, the group CEO of NatWest, which includes Coutts, has apologised to Nigel Farage after his account was closed. Dame Alison Rose apologised for what she calls deeply inappropriate comments made about Mr Farage in the now published papers. She continued saying it's not the company's policy to drop a customer on the basis of legally held political and personal views. A full review of the Coutts processes on how these decisions are being made will be carried out. Well, speaking on his show here on GB News last night, Nigel says questions remain for NatWest.
There's a reiteration of the offer to give me NatWest services. This offer was made verbally to me just before I went on air on GB News a couple of weeks ago. I also wonder if I go to NatWest, how long will it be before they close me down? Because there's no guarantee that they'll keep me as a customer, and that does genuinely concern me.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has sacked his country's ambassador to the UK. Vadim Prystaiko was reportedly dismissed after publicly criticising the president's response to a row over gratitude for British military aid. Earlier this month, the UK Defence Secretary Ben Wallace said the UK and the US were not Amazon when it came to Kyiv's request for weapons and military equipment. Well, he called Mr Zelensky's promise to thank the UK Defence Minister every morning unhealthy sarcasm. Kyiv has given no official reason for the dismissal but confirmed that Mr Prystaiko was no longer the ambassador. Meanwhile, the White House has confirmed Ukraine's using US cluster bombs against Russian forces in the country. National Security spokesperson John Kirby says they're being used effectively against Russian defence and operations. Cluster munitions, which are banned in more than 100 countries, release large numbers of smaller bomblets that can kill over a wide area. Those that fail to explode pose a danger far into the future. The US agreed to supply them to boost Ukraine's ammunition supplies. And holidaymakers have been warned not to touch dead birds on Welsh beaches as concerns rise over a bird flu outbreak. In recent weeks, reports of bird carcasses washing up on shores in West and North Wales have increased as wild bird colonies around the UK continue to be affected. The Welsh Climate Change Minister, Julie James, described the situation as heart-wrenching. She said it's important people don't help spread the disease further. You're with GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now it's back to Emily and Tom.
Well, a very good morning to you from myself and my hat. And, of course, Emily Carver. My name is Tom Harwood, and this is Britain's Newsroom here on GB News. Emily, why am I wearing a dunce's cap?
Well, Tom tweeted something rather bizarre last night. In a moment of madness, he suggested that if the Tories hang on to one of the seats in the by-election, he would eat his hat, because he thought there was absolutely no chance that the Tories would win. There we go, voting over now. I will eat an item of clothing on air if the Tories hold a single seat. And guess what, Tom? What happened?
The Tories held a single seat. Do you know what? The really annoying thing is I'd spoken to a number of Tories, senior Tories who've been on the phones, knocking on doors the week before, and they were going, you know what, Uxbridge, I think we might do it. I think we might. And I'm like, this is the worst expectations management in the world. There's something wrong with it. These people are just clearly knocking on the pledges that they know they're being sent to the good doors. Maybe the sort of high-ranking MPs are being sent to the Conservative areas of the constituency. The Labour people I was talking to said, oh, no, we're really doing very well there. But, you know, that's...
You usually have your finger on the pulse, but now you've got to eat your words or eat your hat.
Do you know what it was? I didn't go to Uxbridge. I should have gone to Uxbridge. Yeah. I should have felt the mood on the ground, but, you know...
Well, go on then.
I'm a man of my word.
Do what you've got to do. Eat it. Oh, yum. Look at that. That looks delicious.
Delicious.
He's eating his hat.
Nutritious.
Now, this is what you should not do as a political reporter. You should not say such things when you don't know what the outcome could be. You know, we all pontificate, we all suggest what might happen, you know, but I prefer to keep quiet until we have those results, because this is what you end up doing, isn't it?
Look,
eating a hat.
I'm a man of my word. If I say something, I'll follow it through. And honestly, I think the biggest lesson I've learned is if I'm going to talk about a by-election, I should jolly well go there before making a late-night tweet.
He always
about
has his
the
finger
likelihood.
on. Our Tom always has his finger on the political pulse, but not today, and he is eating the hat.
It's a hat I made, actually, in an ad break. Using origami techniques. Which, I mean, I don't think it will kill me. It's not like I'm drinking Diet Coke or anything, you know.
It's not like you're drinking Diet Coke. You know what? While you're munching away, I'm going to go to a view or two, because we've had some brilliant ones coming through. As Stephen says, the Selby election results, that's the one with the 25-year-old one, are more likely to be Conservative apathy, not a rise in Labour. Look at the turnout. Around 20,000 people stayed at home. Yes, that is a very good point indeed. Obviously, turnout is usually a bit lower during a by-election, but there you go. But anyway, I think you can stop munching that now. You've done your duty.
I'm going to finish
your
it.
word.
I'm going to finish it.
OK, yes, he did promise he would finish it.
But let's get more on the by-election while I be incredibly rude with my manners and my mouth. Emily, do you want to take this one?
I do, yes. Joining us now is Luke Trill, UK Director of More in Common. Luke, hello and... Sorry, I'm just giggling because Tom has been, as you've probably seen, Tom has been eating his hat because he got the election results wrong, completely wrong. What's your reaction?
Well, I guess my main reaction is that the voters don't like to make it easy for us to come to broad, sweeping conclusions. In fact, if you had looked at any of those by-elections in isolation, let's imagine they'd taken place on separate nights, you could have come up with three very different stories. If it had just been Selby, we'd be talking about the Conservatives heading for a 1997-style wipeout. If it had just been the Uxbridge by-election, we'd be talking about Labour not really sealing the deal, and actually, is there hope for a Tory comeback? And of course, that result in Somerton, perhaps the most predictable of the three, showing the strength of the Liberal Democrats' by-election machine. So three quite interesting results in very different parts of the country, and very hard to come up with one clear overall narrative.
So varying paths that the next 12 or so months could take. People often talk about what is the Conservatives' path for victory and discuss what is described as a very, very narrow path. What could Rishi Sunak do? What needs to go right for Rishi Sunak in order for him to cling on to some semblance of majority?
Well, as you say, the chance of the Conservatives, from where we're standing now, hanging on to a majority seems pretty difficult. But I think Uxbridge showed us what that might look like. So, first of all, you'd have to hope that the economy improves quite significantly over the next year or so, and not just those headline figures, but that people actually feel it. And then what the Conservatives will be hoping to do from Uxbridge is to identify similar, what are sometimes called wedge-style issues, issues that really differentiate them from Labour and put them on the right side of the electorate. So in Uxbridge, that was the ULEZ extension, which was very unpopular with the voters that we spoke to. You should perhaps, Tom, have gone and spoken to some of those voters before making your bet about eating your hat. But the Conservatives will be looking for similar factors at play. So I think we can see the Conservatives potentially engaging in quite a guerrilla-style campaign between now and the next election, and just hoping that what Uxbridge shows is that when Labour face a proper disciplined campaign, that lead isn't quite as strong as it first appears. Of course, on the flip side, we have Selby, which was a much more traditional straight fight without those complicating factors. And there we saw Labour overturn the biggest majority that they've overturned in a by-election in recent history. So it's not going to be easy for the Conservatives to find that magic sauce.
Just on that ULEZ issue, I think one of the things that I might have misinterpreted is that because it was so obviously unpopular, the Labour candidate in the by-election actually said he started agreeing with the don't expand ULEZ position, which I thought, might sort of neutralise that a bit, and because the Conservative Party is so popular everywhere else, they might have done. But actually what it seems that might have done is made the Labour message seem more confused and less united.
I think that is definitely true. Again, it was really interesting when we held a focus group in Uxbridge that people had noticed the Labour candidates, what we would call flip-flop, on the issue. And that's really unusual. You don't normally get people in a seat knowing about individual local candidates' stances. So it just shows how high-profile ULEZ was, and this sense that actually, Labour didn't have a consistent message. And the problem there, of course, is we know that that isn't limited to ULEZ. When we speak to voters right around the country, they say, look, I'm kind of done with the Conservatives. They've messed up the economy. They're obsessed with chaos. I don't really know what Labour stands for. They just seem to criticise without having a platform of their own. And I think there will be people in Labour HQ now looking at this result and saying, no, we've got to have something more concrete and definitive to offer to the electorate if we're going to hold on to that big lead.
I think you're absolutely right there. A lot of people say they don't know quite exactly what the Labour Party stand for under Keir Starmer. But thank you very much indeed, Luke Trill, UK Director of More in Common.
Well, let's get some more on the background of the politics of all of this. Joining us now is the senior political correspondent at the Daily Express, Christian Calgie. And Christian Calgie, have you ever had to eat a hat?
No, very, very pleased that I don't have the ego that leads me down the route of mentioning such silly things. I became political in 2015, and I remember the night of that exit poll, and we had, I think, both Alistair Campbell and one of the senior Lib Dems both promising to eat clothing, and they were both humiliated, and I've pledged never to make such a silly error.
Did you make some forecasts ahead of these by-elections? Were you surprised in any way by the outcomes?
Oh, enormously. I think the one thing that you can praise CCHQ for in this election is that their expectation management game was a heck of a lot better than it was at those local elections, where, of course, they were saying, we'll lose 1,000 seats. Everyone heard, we'll lose substantially fewer than that. They lose 1,000 seats. They're left looking slightly ridiculous. I certainly didn't expect them to win in London. And I'm starting to wonder whether the ULEZ issue for the Conservatives is a bit like inheritance tax. It's one of those issues that is incredibly divisive, and it's a very unpopular policy, despite not actually affecting a great deal of people. So I think what it shows, that many people have said, is that the Tories have to find a dividing line. They have to find an issue that Labour can't compete on or have to flip-flop over to their position and compromise on in order to garner that sort of support across the country. The difficulty is finding a national level issue that's similar to ULEZ.
Well, of course, the Conservative Party hasn't officially said anything about inheritance tax yet, although there have been some leaks to certain newspapers. That is such an interesting comparison, because as you rightly say, ULEZ doesn't affect every car, it affects a small number of cars, but people feel there's an inherent unfairness to the way in which it's carried out. And the same way that inheritance tax is sometimes branded as a death tax, people, after they die, the state stripping their assets from them, losing their family homes and all the rest of it. But perhaps that is a really key wedge issue that the Conservatives might do well at sort of promoting.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And it's one of those things that Rishi Sunak needs to go away and think about. I think we understand that he's now going to spend the summer basically preparing for the Conservative Party conference, which is going to be seen as absolutely make or break for Rishi Sunak's premiership. He's going to be formulating a very important keynote speech in which he's going to set out the big vision. He's going to try and turn away from what has sort of been, labelled as sort of McKinsey-style crisis-level management politics into something that can maybe offer a bit of hope, especially for Tory activists and the electorate. So that's the big issue now. And I think he'll just be incredibly relieved that, actually, I think
Christian,
even with 3 losses...
Sorry to interrupt you there, but we don't have much time left. There have been rumours about a reshuffle coming up. Do you think Rishi Sunak's going to change the deck chairs around?
We're getting to a point where it looks unlikely to happen today. I put in a couple of requests with number 10 people who were, they denied it, I think, on Wednesday. I've not heard anything back, so we can't rule it out for certain, but I think it's always good to have that carrot and stick dangling over potentially rebellious MPs over a long summer break.
My theory is that they would have done the reshuffle if they lost all the seats, but because they've clung it up in Uxbridge, they don't really need to move the story on that much. They can stick to that bit of news. But Christian Calgie, thank you so much for talking us through those big political issues and looking to the future as well, which we like to do here on Britain's Newsroom. Well, coming up after the break, in a few moments, we'll be joined by Steve McCabe, the Labour MP for Birmingham Selly Oak, for his thoughts and indeed Labour reactions. Stick with us for that.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, it's Aidan McKibben here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Sunny spells in 1 or 2 spots today, but quite a few showers once again, and then turning more generally unsettled later as some weather systems move in, and they're going to bring a breezy and damp weekend, certainly through much of Saturday. Ahead of those weather systems, showers breaking out, especially across northern Scotland, into parts of southern Scotland, northern England, the Midlands and Wales. Further south, fewer showers, although you wouldn't rule them out completely. A better chance of seeing some sunny spells, the brightest skies though, southwest Scotland, Cumbria, Devon and Cornwall. Well, we see some brightness, high teens, low 20s, but still feeling on the cool side in the north of Scotland with the breeze, and Northern Ireland as more persistent rain sets in by the end of the afternoon. That spreads more widely into western Scotland, northwest England and West Wales by the end of the night. And with the cloud and rain moving in, well, it's going to be a slightly milder night. But we'll see some clear spells towards the southeast and the north of Scotland, where it will be a chilly start. And actually Scotland, the north at least, seeing plenty of bright weather throughout Saturday. Elsewhere, we've got rain on and off spreading across the country. That rain will be heavy and persistent, particularly over western hills and coasts. And it will be breezy around southwestern coasts with gales in exposed spots. So all in all, an unsettled day to come and feeling very much on the cool side.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it. Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10:24, just about to turn 10:25.
It's 11:24.
Oh, sorry, 11. I can't even read this morning, goodness me. In fairness, I was up watching some of those results last night, those by-elections. But it's not just by-elections we're watching here on Britain's Newsroom. We're also talking about some of the other big stories of the day. My name's Tom Harwood, and I'm here with Emily Carr.
Yes, now for some good news. Retail sales have increased by 0.7% in the month of June. That's defeating forecasts for a mere 0.2% rise.
And government borrowing for June is less than expected too, but still marks the third highest June on record. Well, let's make some sense of what on earth all of that means. Joining us for more on this is our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money.
So, people are spending more money.
They are indeed, Emily. Retail sales are up on the month, but they're actually down on last year. Let me explain how those two things can happen at once. So we can have a look at the numbers. Sales volumes were up 0.7% in June on the previous month, on May 2023, but those sales were down 1% on June 2022.
Right.
So there's a sort of gradual slowdown happening. What we saw in June last month, the month we just had, we saw a bounce back in food sales. Weather was very good. Lots of people having barbecues and so on, having people around celebrating the good weather. Having said that, overall consumer confidence in July, these are unofficial numbers from the GfK consultancy, is actually down. And it seems now that the interest rate rises, fiscal dragging people into higher tax thresholds, less disposable income, the idea that the UK is going to go into recession, which is pretty now almost nailed on, I'd say.
Wow.
And you know what? It's not just a crisis of consumer confidence that we seem to have down the track. It's also a crisis of business confidence, particularly those small businesses that we champion here on GB News. Here indeed is Alan Sodhi of the Federation of Small Businesses.
There is a cost of living crisis affecting consumers, but there is a cost of doing business crisis as well, particularly affecting smaller businesses who don't have the big pockets of big, large global corporates. And that's higher interest rates, it's inflation, it's the highest tax burden for 70 years. The only way out of that is to ease some of that burden, to have policies in place from government and from others that actually allow these businesses to have more of the money that they take to spend, to invest, to grow, to create jobs, and ultimately to get back economic recovery.
Well, some hope of recovery there, but I suppose it is interesting. On the one hand, there's sort of tightening going on with interest rate rises, but the government is still borrowing a lot of money every year.
The government's borrowing a huge amount. Just on the Federation of Small Business there, they're really looking to see what happens, as indeed much of the business world is, and indeed many mortgage holders, what happens on the 3rd of August. That's when the Bank of England next will make an interest rate move or not, its next decision. There is now a genuine debate about whether or not rates should go up, given that inflation was a bit lower earlier this week, 7.9% now during the year to June. So I think that's a really, really interesting sort of moment in British economic policy making. And as you say, Tom, the government is still borrowing like Billio. In June, the British state borrowed £18.5 billion in June alone. That's the equivalent, you know, if you think like 6 billion quid is a penny on income tax, that's like the revenue that you get from 3p on the basic rate of income tax. They borrowed all of that. Wow. That's slightly less than in June 2022, not £400 million less than in June 2022, but it's still the third highest June total on record. And get this, for me, this really exposes why it's so grotesque that the government's borrowing so much money. Because of the £18.5 billion that we borrowed in June, £12.5 billion of it went on debt interest payments, paying the interest on previous debt.
That's almost all of the borrowing we did, or at least the majority of the borrowing we did in June is going on paying for the borrowing we're doing.
But of course, it doesn't stop the political media class saying instantly, we're borrowing slightly less than we thought we were going to borrow, so now we can cut taxes. I mean, it's just... It's circular thinking. Look, I want to see lower taxes, I absolutely do. But you've got to cut taxes because you believe that tax cuts are going to lead to more growth, which solves borrowing there. Don't cut taxes because we're paying slightly less. Yeah. We're borrowing slightly less than the OBR said we were going to be borrowing.
There does seem to be a very popular view, unsurprisingly, that we could just continue to borrow as much as we like forever and a day. Let us know what you think about that.
Yes, GBViews at gbnews.com. Liam, thank you so much for bringing us those latest slightly worrying statistics, and the good news mixed in there with the pretty depressing.
A little bit of a glimmer of hope, although Liam said a recession is very much, well, the odds on.
Yeah, odds on, goodness me. Well, it's been a dramatic night, of course. There were the three main parties winning one by-election each in a really quite equitable outcome. Is this what elections would be like under communism? I'm not sure. One each.
There would be only one party, Tom,
That's
under
true.
communism.
You're completely...
The Labour Party won the Selby and Hastings by-election. Considered a victory for Sir Keir Starmer's party, of course, as they managed to overturn a Tory majority of more than 20,000.
Well, let's speak to a representative of the Labour Party now. Steve McCabe is the Labour MP for Birmingham Selly Oak. And Steve, I suppose on the one hand, congratulations, the Labour Party overturned a huge majority up in Selby. But on the other hand, everyone expected you to win Uxbridge, a majority that was less than half that of Selby, and you didn't manage it.
Yeah, well, if I'm going to be honest, it was a night of mixed fortunes. Selby is a spectacular result. I don't think anyone would argue with that. And Keir Mather deserves all our congratulations for a brilliant campaign there. And I think in Selby, what we did see is something Labour's been looking for. There was evidence of Tory voters switching directly to Labour, and that is very encouraging. Uxbridge, as you say, very different picture. I mean, a lot of the focus is going to be on the ULEZ element. I mean, I wonder if we need to pay a little bit more attention to the messaging in that campaign, to the expectation management, and to maybe the structure and organisation of the campaign. Labour had never won Oxbridge, I don't think, since 1966, when it was quite a different seat. So, I mean, the expectation that we would win there, I'm not sure whether that was the smartest thing to let ride. And as I say, if ULEZ was the issue that people think it was, it's amazing that that wasn't uncovered in sort of pre-by-election research so that there was better preparation for it.
Now, very quickly, I've been getting a bit of grief, well, divided opinion over Keir Mather, the new MP, Labour MP in Selby. He is only 25, and from what I've seen, he's been a parliamentary researcher for Wes Streeting. He's worked a bit in public affairs. Is that really the type of candidate that Labour voters want? Yes, he won in Selby, but is that the right type of candidate to represent people?
Well, I saw Johnny Mercer had a few lines on this as well recently. Look, the people of Selby certainly wanted him. I think there's no doubt about that. And if we're going to start questioning people's background and their age, you know, we're going to start having to ask what Charlotte Owen did to merit a lifetime job in the House of Lords.
Fair enough.
That is a fair point. I think that's probably a more pertinent and recent example. I kept bringing up Pitt the Younger earlier in our conversation, who I'm a big fan of. But no. Looking more seriously now for the Labour Party and the prospects, just very briefly. Is Labour now going to win the general election? This is pretty much dead cert.
Well, I think what it shows is that we are capable of winning, and I think that's what Selby reveals, and as I say, Tory voters switching direct. But I think it also shows it's not in the bag, and it would be really silly of anyone on the Labour side to assume that this is just a matter of time now. I think the deal is yet to be done with the public.
Thank you very much indeed, Steve McCabe there, Labour MP for Birmingham Selly Oak, celebrating that Selby win.
And indeed, a word of caution about being too overly celebratory, really. Nothing's in the bag. Well, still to come, it's your news headlines with Tatiana.
Tom, thank you. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Rishi Sunak has suffered a double by-election loss, with Labour and the Liberal Democrats both overturning majorities of more than 20,000. Labour won Selby and Ainsty, and the Lib Dems took Somerton and Frome on sizable swings. The Prime Minister says the Conservatives' by-election victory in Uxbridge and South Ruislip, Boris Johnson's old seat, shows the next general election isn't a done deal. He said the defeats were far from favourable, but he plans to double down and deliver for the people. Department stores and furniture sellers had a good month as sales were higher than expected in June. Figures from the Office for National Statistics found the retail industry did better than expected last month. Sales in supermarkets were also a driving force behind the bounce back. Growth still fell annually, but at its slowest rate since the beginning of the Ukraine war. Tenants are feeling the squeeze as landlords in and outside of London increase rents by between £300 and £500 per year. The average asking price for rents outside of London has risen by £308, with an average price per month of £1,200, while landlords in the capital have increased their asking price by £559, with the average monthly rent at just over £2,500. And Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has sacked his country's ambassador to the UK. Vadim Prystaiko was reportedly dismissed after publicly criticising the president's response to a row over gratitude for British military aid. Earlier this month, Defence Secretary Ben Wallace said the UK and US were not Amazon when it came to Kyiv's request for weapons and military equipment. Mr Prystaiko called Zelensky's promise to thank the UK Defence Minister every morning unhealthy sarcasm. Kyiv gave no official reason for the dismissal, but confirmed that Mr Prystaiko was no longer the ambassador. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.1261 and £1.1560 euros. The price of gold is £1,526.17 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,648 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
And action.
Sergeant, read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Well, a very good morning to you. It's 11:41 in 3 seconds. It's 11:41 here on Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Tom Harwood, and Emily Carver.
Yes, and we have our lovely panel, wonderful panel, back with us. Deputy Editor of CapEx, Alice Denby, and political strategist and former Labour councillor, Kevin Craig, to go through the biggest news stories of the day. Alice, shall we start with you?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about this story about a joint declaration between the EU and Argentina referring to the Falkland Islands as Las Malvinas. So that is obviously extremely offensive to the people of the Falkland Islands. They held a referendum on British sovereignty in 2013. Do you know how many people voted against British sovereignty?
Was it 4?
3.
Oh!
3 people. And what's the population?
Oh,
do we not know that?
I don't know.
I do know it was 99.8 or something, 99.8% wanted to be British.
These islands are British. There is no question about that. And referring to them by their Argentinian name is deeply offensive. And frankly, I hate to confess to GB News viewers, but I voted Remain in the referendum. I'm reconsidering the way they're treating this British territory.
Was it deliberately provocative, do you think?
I think it was just an oversight. I mean, perhaps I suppose you could argue from a Remain perspective that had the UK been at the table, this mistake wouldn't have got made. But yeah, I think...
Because they never annoyed the Brits when we were there.
That's a good point too. Kevin, do you have anything to say about that one?
I just think it's really stupid on behalf of the European Union to do something which, you know, we've got veterans, we've got people who lost their lives in that conflict. They self-determine as proud Brits. And, yeah, a real mistake, which I'm glad they've corrected. I think it was cock-up, not conspiracy.
It did take the intervention of the Foreign Secretary for them to correct themselves, though.
But, you know, we're not there anymore, so this is what happens, Tom, Emily.
But yes, I do worry that the president in Argentina will take this as... Well, he has taken it as a big diplomatic win. He may campaign further.
I saw a tweet from some foreign minister in Argentina saying self-determination does not apply to the Falkland Islands, or they called them Las Malvinas. And I was like, what an extraordinary worldview, where you believe in self-determination, and clearly they believe in their independence from Spain, but they don't believe in the right of the people of the Falkland Islands. So, anyway, I'm getting away from myself.
There's no chance that they would be able to take back the Falkland Islands, or take them. Sorry, not take back.
It depends how depleted our armed forces become. But Kevin, Just Stop Oil.
Yeah, I think I chose this story because I think Just Stop Oil protesters, whilst I have a lot of sympathy with their objectives, which is a better planet and environment, they really now have got low levels, I would say, of public support, so much so that people are now, and some well-known YouTubers are doing to Just Stop Oil as Just Stop Oil has been doing to the rest of the country in recent weeks and months. And there's a very funny story on the front page of the Metro about how this happened yesterday. And, you know, at some point they're going to stop these protests, I think, because, you know, the government are against them. Keir Starmer thinks it's selfish. I think he's right that they are doing these protests. And now the public are taking things into their own hands. It's quite funny.
The Conservatives are trying to make some gains over this in terms of public support. Because, you know, writing letters to the Labour leadership saying, you back Just Stop Oil, you should sack your shadow ministers. That's what Suella Braverman said. And then Grant Shapps also piped up.
Well, I mean, Emily, just for accuracy's sake, I mean, Keir Starmer does not support Just Stop Oil.
They share the same donors.
Well, one guy who's an energy entrepreneur, owns a football club, he also supports them. But, you know, the Labour Party does not support the actions of Just Stop Oil. It just doesn't.
I wonder if there's actually a counterproductive point here about Just Stop Oil riling people up so much that they're more likely to say, do you know what, let's open a new oil field. Let's do it, not because we want to, just to spite the smug gits who want to throw paint at paintings.
Well, that's just your way of thinking, Tom.
Well, I feel like there's a fairly powerful consensus that, you know, climate change is happening and we do need to take action to prevent it. We've seen these extraordinary heat waves in Europe, and I think that their tactics are completely counterproductive. And frankly, I'm astonished that this is the worst that's happened to them so far. I'm surprised that there hasn't been a horrible accident or an act of violence against them, because their tactics are so alienating to the public.
Well, let's move on to the biggest story of the night. Kevin, you've picked out, of course, these by-elections and the extraordinary results.
Yeah, and I do think that you were surprised, obviously, and I hope your digestive system is OK. But I think it is, I would say, the big message is to the Labour Party is you're not there yet, and you need to think very carefully about policies that cause people or can be perceived to cause financial harm. There's no doubt that air quality in London is terrible, and Hillingdon is the borough with the worst air quality in London. But ultimately, cost of living crisis, it is a real wake-up call. You know, I do think that there is a huge chance of a Labour-led government or a Labour government, but, you know, the Conservatives, the lesson here is, and, you know, I've fought and won a number of both council elections and lost a parliamentary election, but they were clever. They weaponised ULEZ and they made it a referendum on that. And, you know, Labour needs to just take a period of reflection on what was otherwise a great night.
Yeah, Alice, do you think that there's a risk here that the Labour Party has been enjoying their 20-point poll leads? And do you remember the Sheffield rally in 1992 where Neil Kinnock stood up in front of all these flags and went, "We're all right, we're all right," and he went on to lose?
It's not that, Tom. Sorry, Alice.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the lesson from these by-election goes both ways. I think you're absolutely right that people in Uxbridge clearly voted on the basis of their pockets, right? That they were worried that ULEZ was going to make them poorer. I think that same applies for when the Conservatives go to the country for a general election. People are going to be thinking, am I poorer now as a result of the actions of this government? And the only possible answer to that question is yes.
Yeah.
Well, unless there's a massive upswing in economic growth, inflation is down to 2%.
Two solid Tories here on the centre of the table.
Well, actually, I don't know how I will vote, and I certainly won't be telling our viewers and listeners, or you, Kevin.
I think the most interesting thing.
Remember, right?
There are Conservative staffers I have spoken to who will not be voting Conservative at the next election.
Wow.
Mainly younger people, because they're so exercised by the issue of housing and so irritated by how Rishi Sunak has behaved over becoming the NIMBY party. And I think there are a lot of people who are genuinely angry, probably not enough to swing seats, but it is interesting amongst politically engaged young people how few now support the Conservatives.
Tom has spoken to the 3 remaining young Conservatives.
I think there's an important point. You were talking about Westminster staff, but these are Londoners, right? And the Conservative Party, Uxbridge aside, has completely abandoned London. The joke mayoral contest, you know, the whole levelling up agenda is an explicitly anti-London campaigning footage. So, I mean, why should any Londoner, young or old, vote Conservative?
It's interesting to think that it wasn't that long ago that a man named Boris Johnson actually won the city. But I suppose that the election is won in the rest of the country as well. And the interesting thing about last night is that the London seat the Tories took, and the seat down in Somerset and the seat up in North Yorkshire were lost by the Conservatives. This is, if anything, Rishi Sunak's south-eastern strategy.
Yeah, and the results in the southwest and in Yorkshire were really historic. The sizes of the swings were just off the scale, and, you know, whatever one's own politics, I think they didn't there. The referendum was, how do you think the last 13 years have been and how are you feeling? And Rishi's got huge work to do.
Yeah, you know, I think, I mean, people can tell us at home what they think, but if people vote Conservative, it's probably because they think Labour will be worse, rather than they have some massive enthusiasm for Rishi Sunak, although you could say that the same applies to Keir Starmer, of course.
Yeah, and I wonder if within Uxbridge there was an almost unique element of the Conservatives having a message, a simple message to take to the public, which they didn't have in the other seats. They don't have... What is the sort of big, optimistic vision from the Conservatives? There's nothing there. There's nothing that they're offering people, apart from stability. And I suppose, Alice, stability 20 points behind in the polls is being... That's what Rishi Sunak wants to offer.
I mean, I think you could say the same about Labour, though. What's Keir Starmer's big, exciting vision, apart from not being the Conservatives? And frankly, he seems to be doing as much as he can to alienate kind of traditional Labour voters with saying he's going to keep basically Conservative policies like the two-child benefit cap. In fact, he's looking more like the Conservatives than the Conservatives are.
He's offering a great vision. We haven't got time, Alice. But,
and they've scrapped all of their green stuff too, or at least watered it down with the 28 million.
Delayed it.
Well, I mean, I've said this before, but Rachel Reeves is offering more supply-side reform in the I don't know, idea of Liz Truss than the Conservatives are. They want to scrap the sort of regulations on building things, whereas the Tories, what are they doing in terms of scrapping regulations? Anyway, let's go across now to... Oh, no, let's not cross across to our... Let's stick
go to some
this.
views.
Let's stick with this because people have been writing in a lot about our big question of the day, which is 25 too young to be a Member of Parliament? Of course, Keir Mather, the namesake of the party leader of the Labour Party, won in North Yorkshire. And Bernie, has written in to say, in their wisdom, the ancient Greeks would not allow anyone under 30 to hold senior office in government. Under that age, they were considered inexperienced. Well,
is that
where
true?
Where did that get the? And also, not all the ancient Greeks, I suppose, because I mean it was only the Athenians
they only lived till about 32.
I think in the US they do have age limits on various elected offices.
25 for the House and 35 for the Senate.
I don't think people would necessarily say that that's done much for their democracy.
If anything, it's too old, right? That's.
I think maybe I'm a little bit old-fashioned with my view, perhaps, because I do think 25, by and large, I don't think there should be a rule. But I think, as a 25-year-old, there is absolutely no way I would think I would be fit for office in the House of Commons.
Well,
what do I know at 25?
Okay, what about
this chap has had a totally political career. He hasn't had a proper job by
Emily, what about Gladstone, who entered Parliament at the age of 22? Charlie Kennedy, age of 23. Churchill, Balfour and Tony Benn, age of 25. David Steele, the age of 26. Yeah. Thatcher first stood at the age of 25. And indeed, Pitt the Younger got elected age 21, became Prime Minister aged 24.
OK, well, that was quite a good speech. No, I can't really say much to that. It was just a list. I just think 25-year-olds are too young.
Well,
Perhaps
do you know what? I think
some
of the older MPs are just so poor, so bad at speaking and can't sort of get their point across. Some of them are blathering idiots, quite frankly.
Yes, but it's all well and good having the gift of the gab and being able to speak well, but you have to have something of substance to say.
But young people need more voices in Parliament because, as Alice said earlier, access to housing, the ability to get on is harder than it has been for generations. And I think 25, a doctor could be fiddling around in an operating theatre, saving your life, flying you to Brussels, for example, and so they're old enough to sit on the green bench.
Yeah, maybe
surely.
I think there's another point about this particular candidate, he's a Labour moderate. Many of the younger MPs tend to be kind of extremists.
And this chap isn't.
Yeah, so I think, good
No,
on him.
he's not a socialist flag-waving Corbyn supporter. But let's cross now to Olivia Utley, who is at College Green, just outside Parliament, for us. And Olivia, we're expecting, I believe, a political leader to be speaking in a few moments' time.
We're expecting a speech from Keir Starmer, who I think we can expect to sound pretty victorious over in Selby, and rightly so, really. I mean, the swing from the Conservatives to Labour in that North Yorkshire seat was 24 points. Now, bear in mind that Labour only needs a 12-point swing across the country to win an overall majority in a general election, and only a 7-point swing to win the largest party in a general election. So it's a pretty good day for Keir Starmer. If that result was replicated across the country, of course we can't extrapolate by-election victories like this, but if we could, if we're being theoretical about it, then Labour would win a bigger landslide than Tony Blair, and the Tories would be reduced to under 30 seats. Now, of course, it wasn't all plain sailing for Keir Starmer. They were expecting to win Uxbridge, Labour, and they lost it. Only by a pipsqueak, it's true, but that's still pretty bad news. Essentially, what happened in Uxbridge was the simplest explanation, which we're pretty sure is the right one, is the people of Uxbridge, which is an outer London borough, are fed up with the idea of ULEZ. They don't like the idea of ULEZ expanding from inner London to outer London. And this was a vote against Sadiq Khan and his policies. The problem, though, for Labour, there could be a bit more of an existential problem for Labour there, in that theoretically, when you poll people in Britain about what they think of green policies, they are pro more green policies, they're pro the net zero agenda, they're pro measures to cut down on vehicle emissions. But as the Uxbridge by-election seems to have proved, when push comes to shove and they're actually forced to choose between a policy that's good for an environment and a policy that's good for their own wallets in the middle of a cost of living crisis, they are more concerned, understandably perhaps, about their own wallets. Now, is that going to be a problem for Keir Starmer's Labour, which, remember, one of Keir Starmer's 5 big priorities that he keeps talking about is creating a big green economy? Well, in theory, that appeals to people, but in practice, is that quite so true? The other potential issue for Keir Starmer is that it sounds like quite a lot of tactical voting went on in those two by-elections. In Selby, where Labour won so convincingly, managing to overturn that 20,000 Tory majority, the Lib Dems came in last place, sort of 2 or 3% of the vote, right behind all of the smaller parties. And in Somerton, where the Lib Dems won so decisively, a 29-point swing over to the Lib Dems, Labour came in pretty much last place. Now that implies that perhaps what was going on was that there were people, the activists on the ground in each of those constituencies were persuading people to vote anything but Tory. Well, that's doable in a by-election when you've only got a small number of people to deal with and you could be pretty organised about it. But in a general election, we might not see voting work in that way, which could be a bit of a problem for Keir Starmer. If he is relying on tactical voting, there could be some issues going forward to the general election. Pip, more from me a bit later, I'm sure, but back to Pip and Mark in the studio.
Olivia, thank you very much indeed, and welcome to the live desk here on GB News. And we can tell you in the next few minutes, Keir Starmer will be making a speech after a historic night for his party in North Yorkshire. I think we can bring you the scene now at this